Hi, welcome back to part 2, and on this video, this final video of the seal, I'm really going to be working a lot with the pastel pencils. This is going to be the refinement video, so lots more textures going on there. I'll be darkening lots of areas, lightening lots of areas. You can see I always get those darks in first, so the base that I've got down is primarily the mid-tones. Now I can put the dark areas in, so these would be the shadows that's going to be in between the highlights that will go on top. Resting my hand on that glassine paper because it's important now that I don't disturb that underlayer too much. The pastel mat grabs the pastel very well anyway, but obviously if I was just resting my hand on there, I'd be moving and lifting at least some pastel. Of course, if you're working vertically, then you could probably get away with a marl stick that's not touching the surface, or perhaps some artists just don't actually rest their hand on the surface anyway. They can do it without that. I personally like something to rest my hand on, to steady my hand, always have done from day one, whether it's oils or pastels. So there's not a great deal of texture on this seal anyway, and I could have left it loose, I suppose, at the end of the last video and just put a few more darks and highlights in, but you know me, I always like to see how far I can take a subject, and even my little work in progress tutorial ones I do starts out to be very short videos, perhaps lesson just on a little bit of white fur, usually turn into an in-depth lesson and drawing because I just get carried away. So I'm just going to continue adding this little bit of texture. Now I've got those darker areas in, I can come back in, add some highlights. This is a Pitt pastel pencil. It's not critical, you know my favourites are Carbothello, then I like the Pitts and the Giocondas. They all seem to layer very well and nice and easy on top, especially the Carbothellos. So you can see there how simply the mid-tone, the darker layer going on, then the highlights creates that fur texture easily, effectively. Just lightly lay in other colours on top because there's obviously some creamy and richer areas here as well. And you can layer colours on top gently, and it's very much like glazing in oils. Just want to lighten this area up. It's a soft area, so I'm using soft pastels. It's also a kind of a largish area as well, so I found those soft pastels a little bit more logical to use those for larger areas such as this, especially when they're soft, as I said. But you could just as easily use a pencil. I don't do a great deal with these soft pastels. I want to use them more. I've built up quite a few colours now, so I'm going to try them out on different subjects, because that gives you guys another alternative if you haven't got pans or haven't got specific pencils. These little sticks are quite inexpensive to purchase. I'm just getting a few colours down on there before I blend it in. Just blending it with my finger quite lightly in that fur direction again. Don't want to go blending sideways if the fur direction is up and down, and vice versa. So you can see that creates a nice softness there under the neck as well. And now on top of that I can add a bit more detail and texturing with my pencils. So I've darkened that area on the bottom of the mouth. It was just a little bit too light, so now I'm coming on with this light grey, mainly in the highlight area, just softening it here and there as well. Not a particularly sharp pencil, I don't need really distinct lines here. And while I'm working on this section as well, I'll just start to tidy up the edge on that under the mouth area also. Now I've got that background down, I can start to do things like get the edge slightly over it now where the highlight is, and I can work on the darks as well, just so that finishes off quite nicely. Not a great deal of detail on this bottom section. All I needed to get right was the actual tones more than anything, so the lights and the darks, to create this almost in shadow area at the bottom. So as I said, not a great deal of texture, but I found that I wasn't getting that mid-tone grey dark enough. So that was throwing that whole area off just a bit. This top section is really the critical part to try and get that light reflected on it, so lots of those blues and light purple hues. Need to get these browns in there, these kind of sienna colours as well, ochre colours. So that would be the actual, probably the dry fur colour pretty much. Just checking out a couple of different pencils on there, because sometimes obviously when you see the pencil in your rack pack, whatever you're keeping it in, it looks a bit different sometimes actually on the drawing. Might come out lighter, might come out darker, so that's where I just put a couple of small marks on to try it out first. So for me to get that kind of colour glow on the top of the head, that bounce light onto the wetness, I need to get that fur on there first and then put the wetness, those blues, actually on top of it. Because that's what's happening in nature. That's what is so much easier to do in pastel, in my opinion, to be able to layer those colours on top just as it's happening actually in nature, actually on the subject itself. So that's why pastels and oils make so much sense to me, because I can do what I'm actually seeing. I'm not reserving light areas at all. I'm able to put the lights on top, over the top of this underlayer. So you can see I'm still leaving some of that underdrawing to show through. That's acting as the darker elements. The darker fur deeper down, the shadowy areas. Just going a bit darker here. Obviously I can put, some of these darker elements and areas back on top if I want to, or in between the lighter strokes I've just done. So just using this really dark colour lightly, just to put in those more distinctive darker areas, add into that texture. And now coming in with that lighter blue purple colour. The soft Gioconda pencils have got some very vibrant colours in there that you don't find in lots of the other sets as well. And obviously being a soft pencil, it goes just a bit lighter, just a bit more easily on top of the underlayers. You can see that wet appearance starting to be produced now, just as I'm putting these on quite lightly, giving that silky glossy look. Just tidying up the edge on the top as well with a white, so that's really bright sunshine, bright light hitting the top. And that's making that look a lot more neater now it's overlapping the background. Okay, so not a great deal left to do on this bottom third. Just basically adding texture, just the same as I've done over the rest of the drawing. So mid-tones are already in. Be doing more of the darks now in this bottom right hand corner, then the lighter tones on top, just to finish off that, and then I'll look at it, as I always do, as a whole, to see what then I can make a bit more punchy, perhaps by adding darker darks and lighter lights as well. So darks and mid-tones pretty much in place here. Just getting those lighter tones on top again. So exactly the same principle. It's all starting to come together quite well. So just small marks. There's no real long fur at all here. And pretty much working as I usually do from the underlayers of the fur and then coming backwards to the fur and the hairs that are lying on top. As I'm doing this, the only thing that's slightly concerning me is how I'm going to get those whiskers on, if I can get them on really cleanly, because they're not like whiskers on any other animal I've ever done. They're very thick. They look like they'd feel quite firm as well. I don't think a pencil is going to do it good enough, so I need to start thinking about what I'm going to do there. And hopefully I won't mess it up, because it's a learning experience for me, as is any project. And I'm not doing these to show off what I can do, or to show that I'm better than other people. I'm learning as well. What I enjoy about drawing and painting is the challenge to see whether or not I can make something look real. And I know lots of people on my Patreon channel now, they've been following me for a year and a half or so from the very beginning, and they are of an excellent standard, so it's very interesting to see what they're creating as well, and we can all learn from each other. So on this subject I've had to learn how to get that kind of wet, slick, light reflective bluey tinge on top. I'd never done that before. Things like this fur texture, I knew I could do that. That wasn't going to be a problem. I've done that on lots of other subjects. So now I'm happy how the blue is turned out on top of the head as well. It's got that wet look, I think. And the next challenge is definitely going to be those thick whiskers. Okay, so almost finished now. I'm really starting to look now at it and think in what areas can be adjusted slightly, if perhaps I can boost the colour in some areas as well. That's always going to make things a bit more interesting to look at, if you can get lots of different variations in there that's still within realism for me. I also like to see some surreal but real work as well by other artists, if you know what I mean, where the colours will be perhaps extremely boosted, but you can still see what subject it is, still looks quite real. I love seeing that, but I like to do it myself in a subtle way, so I can look at the reference, see what colours I can just about pick up in there and perhaps boost those a little bit. Seems to add to the realism sometimes. Add in more of the distinct individual pieces of fur or hair. So my pencil's quite sharp. I'm pushing fairly hard in places, lightly in other places where I don't want it to be so distinct. Boosting that colour up a bit as well, just to make that a bit more punchy. You can see even here I'm adding little bits of purple and blues, helping to create that wet look. Just subtle variations. Okay, moment of truth. This is where everything can be ruined, because if I don't get these whiskers on right, I can't really rub it all out without doing a heck of a lot of major work going back over the top of it. I've chosen a dark pastel stick, hard stick. I've sharpened it on some glass paper, so either a Conti stick or a new pastel stick. I'm starting with the smaller hairs first, so I can get the feel of it. And you can see how I can produce a much more opaque dark mark than I could with a pencil. And I'm also able to get it nice and thick as well. And so I'm starting at the top. As I come towards the end, I'm lifting the pressure off, and that's allowing me to create that tapered part at the bottom, as you just saw. Now these whiskers are going to have the added difficulty of the fact that they're not just pure black or pure white, but they're going to have reflected light and wetness actually on those as well, just to make it that bit more difficult for me. So what I need to do now is something I would suggest not to do normally with paintings, is to be going back over whiskers, but I need to get colours in there. So I've got to use the rest of my hand. I'm using a lot of concentration to make sure I'm going over the line, and it's something you won't pick up so easily on the screen, but if you saw the drawing in real life you'd see all these little colour variations that I'm laying on top of that stark black. And now very carefully I'm just putting some of the highlights on the whiskers in places as well, softening where I need to. So trying not to make any mistakes now. Sharp pencil, steady hand. And then some more of these smaller hairs coming out in various places, and I'm fairly happy with the way the whiskers are turning out. Whoops, broken pencil, that's not a problem. Sometimes the pencils could break, there's nothing you can do about it. So just putting the final little darks. Some of these hairs go in where the thick whiskers go into the fur. I need to put a little bit of a shadow line, so that's what I'm doing. So that makes sense then that they're actually going in there, and then I can put the highlights on the top just in a few places. So here you can see I'm just increasing the highlights just around those areas where the hairs, the whiskers go in, just to make them a little bit more punchy and look like the light is catching them where that's being poked out a bit. Okay, so just a few hairs here as well. Normally use a coloured pencil for this type of thing, but the hairs are not particularly thin. So this seems to be working better just using the pastel. And then the coloured pencil just for a few of the finer hairs where I can actually get the tip that little bit thinner. That's the only time I'm going to be using the coloured pencil, just on tiny little areas like this. Okay, so now the final refinement, so that's where I come and clear up the edges as I've done around the eye. Just adjust little highlights here and there if required as well, the darks, just the final little adjustments. So as I bring this video to a close with the last of the highlights, using my whitest white pencil at Caran d'Ache. Hope you've enjoyed it. It's something very different for me. Hopefully it is for you as well. Don't forget, I'm just showing you the techniques so you can actually go and create whatever drawing you want then with plenty of confidence, knowing that you can layer and create wet fur, a wet look. I'm not actually out when I'm doing smaller works like this. I'm not trying to, as I said earlier, show off what I can do and to show if I'm better than other people. I'm showing you the technique, and it's interesting for me because I'm not having to work a week or two on drawings. I can show you the technique so you can then go ahead, and if you wanted to do a whole lot of seals or full body seal and put it in a setting, you know now how to create that wet look. So I'd be interested to see what you actually create after learning these techniques. So as I'm finishing off, hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you all again real soon for the next videos. Just wanted to quickly mention my Patreon channel for those looking for even more in-depth art instruction. It's packed full of pastel videos, oil videos as well, and those videos are being added to new ones every single month. I have videos for the complete beginner that have never done pastels or oils before with just limited supplies, and I take you from the very first blocking in all the way through to the final detailed drawings and paintings. I've also got some really unusual subjects as well, and in all of my videos I always take you through all the details. You see everything I do, how I create my work. But it's not just for beginners, it's also for novices, and I also show the best artwork that I've ever done as well. And this particular elephant video spans 6 hours, so you know you're going to see tons and tons of details, tips and techniques. And as mentioned, I've got lots of oil videos on there too, so there really is something for everybody, and you get access to hundreds of hours worth of videos for just $4. Now over 1,000 members strong. Hope to see you there soon.